We took our kids on a pilgrimage to understand more about C.S. Lewis, who's the writer of the Chronicles of Narnia, because he was someone who lived with passion. He's someone who lived out of his deep faith. And he was important for us to study as a family because he understood the importance of story. My kids love the Chronicles of Narnia, so we thought that would be really fun to visit some of the places that were important to him. Magdalen College, where he worked, the Eagle and Child pub, where he met with the Inklings. These are other authors like J.R.R. Tolkien. We got to go to the Trout, which he often stopped at when he was coming back into town from walking tours. But I think for us, probably the crowning jewel of the time, particularly for my children, was coming to the Kilns and walking around his house of 30 years, going up into his bedroom, also enjoying the grounds and the garden, Shelley's pond. I also wanted them to come here because this is where the Narnian Chronicles were written. I wanted them to see his study and the room and the place he did that and where his inspiration came from. During World War II, when the evacuees came out of London, Lewis and his brother invited children into their home. And there was one particular day where they complained about being bored, and he couldn't understand how you could live at the Kilns out in the countryside and be bored. The reason he thought they were bored is because they had never read any of the fairy stories. So they had no moral imagination to entertain themselves. They didn't know how to create, they didn't know how to dream, they didn't know how to make their own play worlds, which he and his brother were able to do when they were kids. Many people think they were the inspiration for the Chronicles of Narnia. And I think he realized, maybe more than anyone else, that when you can capture someone's affections, when you can capture their imagination, you begin to get them, and the transformation takes place. And when you're in that story, walking and living virtuously becomes a second nature for you. You don't even have to think about it because it comes out of the new imagination that you have. And what you see then is that pattern is in his stories. You have young kids struggling to be virtuous, struggling to do the right thing, not knowing what it is. And as their imaginations are shaped by Narnia, shaped by Aslan, living within that story, they begin almost instinctively, like it's second nature, to live into their own characters, to become who they were meant to be. In the same way that the characters of the Chronicles of Narnia are in a story and it's almost an enclosed world, my kids are in a story called Christianity. It's a world that God has created in which we have fallen into our own idolatry. We had to have a great hero come in and rescue us, and that's Christ. And we're pulled out of our sin and misery into a new relationship with our Heavenly Father. And then now we're moving on a fabulous journey towards the promised land that one day we will live in forever. And the more you understand the story that you're in, the more it begins to shape you, and the more it not only shapes your imagination, but it shapes your habits and it shapes your actions in life, and you begin to live differently. You live out of the story, you live in the story, and it's transformative. It's not like we ever arrive into deep faith. It is something we're seeking our whole life. And Lewis was a great person who exemplified that kind of life.
Produced by Device Entertainment, with special thanks to the C.S. Lewis Foundation and Grace Community Church, with promotional consideration by InterVarsity Press and Knox Theological Seminary.